My name is Maria Quintero, and I am the Programs and Outreach Coordinator at the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum. I graduated from the Public Humanities program in 2013. And at my job, primarily what I do is listen. At the core of what I do, that is my job. More specifically, I'm in charge of family programs as well as all of our outreach efforts, and I also produce a newsletter for educators. So after graduating from the Public Humanities program, I got a job as the Curatorial Fellow at the New Bedford William Museum. I worked within the Curatorial Department, and what I really took away from that job is that what I was interested in was developing what I would call a community curation process. So I worked with the Cape Verdean community there in New Bedford, and we worked on developing a traveling exhibit. So my approach was really to continue through an approach of outreach, which wasn't what we were calling it then. Was I was having monthly meetings with these people, and throughout the month meeting with different people in the community to really provide a bottom-up approach and a lens of the experience from their perspective. I applied for this job and thought this is a fantastic opportunity to take the community curatorial approach that I was doing and really focus on, as I mentioned before, it was about creating spaces for these things to happen, to focus on creating experiences. And so I was able to shift into my new job in the education department here as the Programs and Outreach Coordinator, actually much more naturally than I expected it to happen. At the New Bedford William Museum, I'd made connections with a lot of the Cape Verdean community throughout Massachusetts, which here in Dorchester is a large part of the local community. So I was able to tap back into those communities to reacquaint myself with the area and acquaint myself with the community of the greater Boston region. Because of my experience at the Whaling Museum, I was able to build upon having that sort of control to really find the best way that I could contribute to the field of public humanities, the best way that I could work with communities through outreach efforts, the very best way that I could approach people and ask and listen to the question, what can we do for you? Instead of going and just trying to get them to show up to my museum. And so that really creates a process of co-creation, of true collaboration that really allows for much deeper appreciation and hopefully more sustained relationships with the institution that go beyond a one-time event, but really create an ongoing process of people that were previously, communities that were previously maybe had no reason to come into a building like this, because what do they have to do with the presidency? To really see how this time period opened the doors for these possibilities of redefining boundaries of community, redefining boundaries of civil rights and of public space and what people were allowed to do with it and how they can continue to engage with that. Community can't be defined by me. It's about me listening and reacting, responding to, being responsive to what people need and how they define themselves. I'm much less interested in, from a top-down approach, figuring out, okay, let's target communities, but I'm more interested in actually going out into neighborhoods or going into public spaces, which now you can even consider, an international world through an online scope, a public space, and finding really from a bottom-up approach what those communities define themselves as. So because the John F. Kennedy Library is, one of 13 presidential libraries in the system, it's always about scale when we're considering community. So I work very closely with our micro-sensitive community, which is our local community, the state of Massachusetts, the area of New England, the local neighborhoods of Dorchester, South Boston. So there's that sense of looking at it and how we can service them, but we also know that it means something different to be a resource on a national level. How can our resources be available to researchers across the country? How can they be available to classrooms across the country? To kids who are curious about this, who didn't live to see John F. Kennedy. when I was applying for jobs, when I was considering my next steps in the transitions that I've made, I was really able to have spent 2 years developing my professional philosophy. And I think so much of the time in other master's programs or other graduate programs, you spend so much time learning about a discipline instead of learning about yourself and what you have to offer. And to be able to say, for the last 2 years, here's what I've done and what I plan to do, I think is an incredible opportunity. So you have a dozen students, you're surrounded by people that you can truly collaborate with, because that is what the field is demanding of you. If you're looking at doing public work, you can't, it's not about you. When it's about providing public service, maintaining the public trust, you really need to know how to collaborate. And that's one thing that I took away from the program, and that I continue to hold as a value in the work that I do every day, is to be able to work with new people and see the skills that they have to offer and maximize the way that we can make a larger impact. One of the things I wish I learned in the public humanities program was a more in-depth focus on evaluation. I think because we are such a fresh and new field, there's a lot of questions around it. And answering those questions in a substantial manner, in an intentional way, that's based on producing results and analyzing those results, that's based on the validity of valuing process over product. Finding evaluative measures for success is instrumental to establishing its sustainability. And so a focus on that, because when you are in the humanities field, you're in this current state, you're constantly thinking to yourself, you're constantly being challenged as to why are these resources being allocated this way? What resources need to be allocated? What partnerships need to be developed? And being able to evaluate how the work is successful is so important to our vitality and our long-term sustainability, to letting the public know why we are valuable, how we serve them. Not just within the circles of people who do public history or public humanities work, but within people who don't. So I always say that the beauty of defining public humanities is that you get to define yourself. I always tell people at a job interview when they tell you, oh, public humanities, what is that? You tell them what you are, what you bring to the table. And to me, public humanities is more of an approach. It's an approach that is responsive. So instead of being a discipline that dictates how things need to be done, it's a discipline that absorbs the needs around it. And it's definitely for generalists. I think you have to have enough curiosity to be absolutely enthralled in anything new and just ridiculously internally curious to learn more about the unknown. Because at its core, the public humanities is about innovation. It's about approaching the conflicts that arise or the challenges that are encountered when you take academia within the humanities field, and you take a public, however you might define it within the work that you're doing, and really form a sustainable connection. I think at the core, the public humanities is about forging connections. Whether you're forging connections between a university and its students, or an artist and an audience, a museum and the communities around it, or immigrants and a president that died long before many of them were alive. It's about forming those connections. It's about bridge building with people and bringing ideas to those peoples and taking ideas from the people that can be developed further and appreciated.